the emphasis on liberal arts has completely been obliterated from schools. If you look at the syllabus now, it's merely about knowing how to speak right, rather than to have a vast expanse of knowledge and basically about the human condition and how human beings behave. And the absence of that is something that you can see seeping into every aspect of our public lives, whether it's in media, whether it's in policy, whether it's in governance, whether it's in politics, whether it's in the corporate world. That absence of humanism is really poisoning our collective public lives, And so when you really look at liberal arts, what are the qualities that, because we're talking in a context of education, what are the qualities that we are really looking at that you want students across subjects, whether it's technology, whether they're doctors or lawyers or technicians, or indeed whether they are army generals, I think the qualities that liberal arts education brings is a capacity for complexity, for multi-pronged thought, that you're able to hold 4 truths in your head at the same time, that you're able to approach a problem no matter which spectrum that problem arises in, with both an analytical approach, an intellectual approach, approach from the heart, and to be able to understand someone else's reality. I'll give you a really interesting example, before the debacle that's consumed my life. We used to host a big event in Goa called Think, and we had the chief of the Mossad there. I think it was last year. And you can't think of a harder organization than the Mossad. And he was retired, but he was looking back over his life. And he said, I would like to unravel so many mistakes we made. And he spoke of a particular offer from the Hamas, which was to have dialogues and talk. And the chief of the Mossad at that time did not even forward that offer to the political powers, because they thought that that's no way to approach a terrorist organization like the Hamas. And he said years later he realized that that was a missive that had not even been forwarded to the politicians, and many people had died, and many operations later, botched operations, many assassinations later, basically everyone still comes back to the talking table. Look at Afghanistan. 11 years of war later, you want to talk to the Taliban, And I think that that's the capacity to be able to, even as you're doing the hard end of the world, the capacity to think creatively is what the liberal arts brings. Speaking from my experience in the media, I think it's almost a security hazard, the way the absence of liberal arts and of this kind of complex thinking and what it's doing to our media discourse. Because the media, again, is something that impacts every layer of our life. And what we have in the media right now is extremely shrill discourse, which is not analytical, which does not understand anyone else's reality. Even the people you critique, which is that every given day of your lives as journalists, you're critiquing either political power and less corporate power, because that's where your bread and butter lies. But the only time that people you criticize will take in your criticism is when they believe that you understand their reality. And the problem with the media and why it's so hollowed out and their criticisms almost discarded by people in the real life arenas is because increasingly people feel that journalists do not understand anyone else's reality. If you're a corporate head, what are the things that you're balancing? If you're a politician, what are the complex realities you're balancing? If you understand that and then critique it, people will take in that criticism. And I think that's completely missing. So again, just to give you a small example from my own newsroom, so we founded this setup called Tehelka, and I came from other news organizations where we were very disturbed by the kind of news organizations we had belonged to. So when we tried to create Tehelka, the newsroom ethos that one inculcated in one's journalists was the idea of plurality, an absolute commitment to complexity, not merely to being adversarial. Yes, we were thought of as an investigative publication, but to a sense of decency, so that even when you're critiquing someone, it is not vituperative, it is not personal, it is always on the basis of principles. And then I think for me, the most important quality that I wanted to impart as an editor or to my own writing was to question why, so that you're not just reporting surface facts, but you're also asking why things happen. And I think that is what a liberal arts education does for you. when you look at most news items today, you'll always be told what's happening, but you'll never be told why it's happening. And, so you're always mystified. You'll be told a particular incident of violence has happened, but you'll never be told the root causes of why that violence has erupted, or what are the historic and personal forces that have come to collide to create a particular kind of situation. And I think that is all which is missing in our media. And then the final thing I'd like to speak about is the social media, which today one mistakes for public opinion. And it really isn't public opinion, or what I would like to say is that the corruptions of the real world is very much reflected in the voices in the internet world, which is to say that there are mediators, you can buy mediators, there is definitely the play of power, of money that is happening on the internet. You hear a very right-wing view on the internet, which can actually be bought. You live in an illusion that this is what people are feeling, but you really put a megaphone to what used to be water cooler gossip. You've put a megaphone to people's personal prejudices and bile and poison. And the thing is that, I'm definitely not atavistic. I'm not trying to take us back to an earlier era. What I'm trying to say is that as human beings, there are certain qualities that imbue our lives and always will until we morph into being robots. And that is that to be able to speak in a public space, you train yourself. You earn the right to be able to speak in a public forum, because then you have to take some accountability for it. But if you put a megaphone to my bedroom bile about my colleague or my uninformed opinion about some politician, and that begins to drive public discourse, politics, governance, policy, what you do with someone else's life, it's dangerous. And the problem today is that none of us have the courage to blow a whistle on this, because you're afraid to not be part of the herd. And I think all that stems back that if you were trained as students to have a liberal arts education, you would understand the importance of taking stands, the importance of individuality, the importance of speaking against the wind. And I think all of that is lost when all you're taught is profit and loss and, the balance sheets of money and self-service. And so that's where I think that liberal education is important.